Okay, just to keep you up on the news, you know I like to do that. I don't know if you read in the papers, a couple weeks ago, Obama met with the Prime Minister of Greece at the White House. That's all fact. Remember that? When he heard that the leader of Greece was there, Biden said, "You mean John Travolta's here?" Think about that for a second. Some of you are too young to get that, but we'll... Okay. Ask your parents for those for what that all means. Okay, our next speaker, I am thrilled to have her here. She's the founder and president of CURE. It's the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. It's a nonprofit think tank which promotes market-based public policy to fight poverty. And by the way, it works. She does it. She is fantastic. She's defended the conservative ideals on shows from Larry King Live to Oprah Winfrey to The View. She's a regular commentator on networks from CNN to C-SPAN to Fox. Star Parker.
Thank you. It's really good to be here. And it's nice to hear your presentation too, Lieutenant Governor. I have not met you, and I'm just very excited about that presentation. What I didn't know, though, in making my plans to retire in South Carolina, that a million others are also considering the same thing. But I have a right to retire here. I have to tell you, I've never lived in South Carolina, but I plan to die in South Carolina because my parents were both from South Carolina. They own property here. In fact, my granddad was one generation out of slavery, and he maintained this ethic and said, if you want to stay free, we need two things, property and a gun. And so he was very diligent with those values, and I never met the man, but we certainly held on to his property, and we have a couple of 100 acres up in the Blue Ridge Mountains north of here. So I am very, very excited about what I heard in your presentation. But although we have that property up in the other part of town or your state, I've been in Charleston now for the last 5 days, so I am hoping that there's room for me here. People were asking me earlier, how do you like it here? I said, well, actually on Saturday, between the busyness of my schedule, I really did call a realtor to find out what it looked like for me to transition out of California where I live to perhaps maintain my residency here now, because I work in Washington, D.C., so people always complain that that's a long commute from California to Washington, D.C., but most of the people that say that I know then have never been on the 405 freeway in Los Angeles, because they would not think that long if they ever tried to drive through our traffic. But there's one thing holding me up from building that residency now, and that is that your state has a income tax. So I'm hoping I can move into a state that doesn't have income tax, because California income tax is already high. But I am glad to hear your focus on Medicaid. One of the things that we do through our think tank is look at Medicaid. So I just want to assure you that there are people that are extremely concerned about this poverty program that is bankrupting state after state after state, but is also very cruel to the poor. Half the doctors in this country won't even take Medicaid because they know that they are not going to be treated equitably by the government. And the people that are living in our hard-hit communities, including our seniors and all of the poor that are trapped in this one-size-fits-all horrible, horrible state of affairs, by us saying that we're going to provide them with health care from womb to tomb, for anything from a boo-boo on their knee that they can show up in the hospitals to take care of, and for their children. It is just a disservice because most of their communities then don't have hospitals, and we're seeing a result. But I do want to assure you, two of my friends are in the room. Steve King and Lee Terry. I was shocked to see them because I know both of them in Washington, D.C. These are brilliant thinkers. We're on the defense now, our team, our little red team, go red. But I assure you that there are many efforts to try to get some sanity back into what we've done through our federal welfare programs, in particular those that are poverty programs. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Star Parker, and I've been engaged in public life for about 25 years. years. And a lot of people know my story because I believe the lie of the left, and I penned my story. In fact, I was telling a group just earlier today that I penned my story in my autobiography and actually named it Pimps, Whores, and Welfare Brats, just to give you an idea of the type of life I used to live, and left details out because I wasn't sure of statutes of limitations. So when I say I believe the lie of the left, I believe the poor were poor because the wealthy were wealthy. I believe that my problems were somebody else's fault, and I believed absolutely everything they're saying this week up in Washington, D.C. as they commemorate the 50th anniversary of the I Have a Dream speech, that the wealthy are wealthy because the poor are poor, and that America is so inherently racist that you don't need to mainstream. And believing those lies, I watched my life spiral into a little dark hole. Criminal activity, drug activity, sexual activity, in and out of their so-called safe, legal, rare abortion clinic after clinic, until after the fourth time, thinking way down deep inside there must be something wrong with killing your offspring. I was pregnant again within a very short period of time, still not married, and went on welfare state to live. I was 7 years in and out of that crippling monster that we've created, saying that in the name of charity, and 3.5 years consistently. And it wasn't until a Christian conversion that I totally changed my life. I got back into college, I got a degree, I started a business. After the '92 Los Angeles riots destroyed my business, I began my journey into social reform. And in that journey, I came across some people. I don't have a lot of time. I'm watching this little thing, so I can't get into a lot of details. But my story is also in my second book, Uncle Sam's Plantation, which actually talks about some of these ideas that we really need to get done in our society today, including Medicaid reform. But I began to work then on welfare reform, and after we were able to get Bill Clinton to sign that into law, I began my organization today that I run, which is called CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, urbancure.org. We're a policy think tank. We assess daily on a regular basis. We think, eat and breathe. Everyone says, do you do anything else with your life? And I said, why would I? We need market-based solutions to fight poverty. And so we look all the time at what we can do to dismantle welfare state. That's why I know these good gentlemen in the room, and that's why I know the heart of many passionate legislators in Washington that understand the crises at hand. And in fact, I just had a meeting that you might be of interest, you might find of interest, with Dr. John Goodman, who is getting ready to speak at my next policy summit in Washington, where we have 60 to 80 black conservative pastors and their wives coming to Washington to listen to him talk about these changes. But he is the author of and the father of health savings accounts. And I actually introduced him ahead of time to Dr. Ben Carson, who's going to then speak for his group, because Dr. Ben and Dr. John Goodman have been thinking very deeply and long about how we're going to reform Medicaid. Those of you that think, well, what exactly is Medicaid and how do we get into that dilemma, which had nothing to do with what I was going to talk about. I didn't even know you were going to bring it up, but I did. How we got into it is when we were developing out these poverty programs, or what they call entitlement programs, and what people are saying we really need to reform, and we know we need to reform. You know, when you're looking at $80 trillion in unfunded liabilities, 10,000 people every day turning 65, we know we have to do these reforms. But the difference between the Medicaid program and the Social Security program and the Medicare, which also need reforms, is that Medicare and Social Security have paying. People are putting into those systems. Medicaid is a 100% poverty program. If you want more information about what I do, it's urbancure.org. If you have resources, I brought packages for those that want to help me in my work. It is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's tax exempt.
Okay, we're gonna take some questions. Questions. I saw a couple of hands up. One way over there. You're gonna have to. Well, we're gonna give you a mic this time, so I don't have to be so curt. Yeah, but the people who are viewing this all over the world.
Ms. Parker, I saw you on that wonderful panel that Hannity had with those many black folks who are conservatives and really said tremendous things. My question is, do you feel that you're making inroads in the black community to get them off that plantation?
We absolutely know we are. In fact, one of the things that we set out to do, CURE, when I started some 15 years ago, is to go try to find those that have told pollsters year after year, in fact, for the last 20 years, that they are evangelical and conservative blacks. We never get to hear from them. We hear from the hard left. And this week, the reason we can breathe so successfully, even in this state, is because all of them are up there in Washington, D.C. Last week, we were able to breathe deeply in Washington, D.C. because the legislators, the lobbyists, and the lawyers were gone. So now, but yes, we know they're there. I like to describe it the way that when Elijah looked out and thought that he was all alone, and God told him, no, there are 7,000 men who haven't bowed to Baal. And he opened his eyes and he found Elisha. Well, we know for a fact through all of this data that's available that there are about 4,000 black pastors that are conservative to heart and soul. So we're organizing them, we're educating them, and we will be mobilizing them. The numbers are coming forth for the first time because of how dark things have gotten for the black community.
Next question. Yes, ma'am. Just wait 1 second. We're going to get you a mic.
Star, Marianne Taylor. I don't know if this is on or not.
It's on for the stream.
Marianne Taylor, I saw you at Bridging the Gap and also had lunch with you today, and you know I'm an educator and I do care about what's going on with the unwed pregnancies and education. But tell me, how can we fight the NAACP if the black Americans cannot fight the NAACP? Because that is killing our educational system. They are not for school choice, and they are taking our schools down.
Right. Unfortunately. Well, that's also what our work is trying to do, is build an army up against them, because that's also how Social Security reform shut down. When President Bush decided he was going to allow money to follow people to their own retirement account, just a little bit, a couple of percent, the NAACP walked into those offices and said no to personal retirement accounts. And yet, between school choice, as you're mentioning, and personal retirement accounts, we could break the cycle of poverty and government dependency in one generation. That's why I want both. But in fact, under the leadership of one of your local legislators, thank you, Samuel Rivers, to invite me to this luncheon today, where...
Well, wait a second. Sam, he didn't invite me.
Because you are not one of the people in the education business. You're in this business, and I don't know why I didn't invite you. You didn't invite Mallory. He's the one that is the reason I'm here.
I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding.
No, actually, it was Mallory who said, Star, you're coming up to see us, and I have somebody you need to talk to. And that was the first time I actually was introduced to Pastor Rivers over the telephone, and our hearts were together, getting back to your question, because they're all over the country. People who have the similar interests, who've known the same answers for a long time. And so he pulled together people. He thought there were going to be 5 to 7 people at the meeting, and we ended up with almost 30 people at the meeting, even people in education that are genuinely concerned about the schools here locally and want to do something. And I think if we continue on that vein and we continue that discussion, then school choice will become a reality. We will be able to push back against the NAACP when we have an army that is saying no to them. They show up to sue in the wrong places, and yet they want to continue the rhetoric that they've been singing, that same song for the last 50 years. Well, they're out of tune. It's an old song, and we need new answers to the crises confronting our youth, including broken family. I want to make one more point on that question about broken family and what the reality looks like for blacks today after buying into this lie of the Democrats and the political promises of entitlement in exchange for social justice. What we're looking at today is 70% of black children being raised in homes that are broken, if you will, that have a single parent. And compare that to the 60s when the civil rights law was enacted. 70% of black children were raised in married homes. It is a direct result of government entitlement and welfare programs that broke the black family, and that's why we have all of these other pathologies to follow: the low educational aspirations, the lack of interest, the more out of wedlock birth rates, the high crime and drug rates, and we're working to stop that and reverse that trend.
We have time for one more question.
Charles Murray was an intellectual. About 1979, he wrote a book called Losing Ground, American Social Policy from 1950 to 1980. It was very influential on Jack Kemp and Ronald Reagan. It basically showed that the Great Society failed.
Right.
The right has a lot of talking heads, but it doesn't seem that the right has like another Charles Murray. It's a very thick book. It's it's too intellectual really for the average person, but it just really describes how it
Can we
doesn't
get to the
take-
question, please?
Yes. Do we have anybody like that besides the debates on TV don't really work as much?
Oh yeah, we do.
Anybody
Star
rising up?
Parker and I wrote Uncle Sam's Plantation. But let me say, but no, let me say this. Dr. Murray is brilliant. You're absolutely right. And even though the book wasn't for average Joe to take and read on his nightstand, it was a book that allowed the thinkers in Washington to grab a hold of real needed data so that we can make the case to start the reforms. You know, we didn't get into this overnight. We're not going to get out overnight. And so we have to allow for opportunities to patiently wait to get those step-by-step reforms. Charles Murray, interestingly, his newest book is called Coming Apart. And what he did was looked at what has happened as a result of us not moving quick enough to get to lock in the challenges of the welfare state in these harder hit communities, and it's now spilling out into the general population. And so he took a look at what out of wedlock birth rates are in the white community now. In those same 60s, they were around 3%. Today, they're at 30%. They're 8% higher where blacks were when they started this social engineering. And the hard left, the secular socialism that they desire, are equal opportunity destroying principles. So we will begin to see, as we are already seeing, and he points out in his new book, the pathologies that we thought were confined to inner city life are now spilling out into our suburban life. We've got to do all that we can to make sure that this next cycle we get a Senate with backbone, and then the next cycle after that we get a president with vision so that we can get this job done. We can't go on like this anymore.
Star Parker Cure. Great job, Star.